Hi, can everybody hear me?
Hey, Adam.
Okay, excellent. Since I've had such problems with I was having my internet cut out, I'm attempting to use phone for audio now, so let's see how that works.
Have to hit you with a point of order there, Adam. Sorry. there's an email chain about a planning commission meeting in the UK. I'll leave that to one side.
Oh, I've been meaning to watch that. Apparently, we're all terribly glad that that we don't run our meetings like that.
This is how we roll in the UK. So it looks like we have about 5 participants. It's Daniel.
Good evening. I think we're still waiting for Naz to log in. If you could give her just a few moments.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, she's having some technical difficulties, it sounds like. So,
as one does.
As one does with technology.
So is that a Panama hat you have in the background?
Yeah, it's just a hat. When it's hot and I go for a walk in the summertime, I wear it. But obviously, right now it's just sitting there. I'm gonna turn off that lamp. It's a little too bright, unnecessarily so. Yep, little cubicles. When I've had this cubicle now for 12 years. But luckily, since we've gone paperless, I've actually ended up a lot more workspace. So I don't have a filing cabinet anymore. I don't need to store any rolls of plans. So technology's really come a long way since I started here.
It's taking over.
Yeah, it's actually going to be 15 years since I started my internship. I started with Campbell in 2006.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Congratulations. You've seen a lot of change.
I have. Yeah, I was in my second year of grad school when I started. I was only 23 years old. So.
You're making me feel really old now, Daniel.
Yeah.
You be quiet.
I tell you, I was the youngest person in City Hall for I think nearly 10 years. So I was a pretty good one I had. Yeah. I think government tends to have a or it's a slightly older demographic.
Well, your wisdom goes beyond your years.
Well, thank you. All right, I'll go dark now and let Naz take over.
Hey, evening, Naz.
Good evening.
Hi, Naz.
Hey there. Sorry about wait a few minutes. Some technical difficulties over here, but worked those out. Okay, so I believe we have the applicant here as well. So I'll go ahead and just get started with the short presentation. Okay, can everyone see my screen?
We have two applicants tonight, don't we, Naz, I believe. One for Teresa Avenue and one for Vineyard.
Correct. So this is for Teresa Avenue, the single-family home. So
with the attached JADU, right?
Correct. So it's at 1495 Teresa Avenue, and it is located this vacant lot here on Teresa, which is off of Parr Avenue. Winchester Boulevard is over here to the lower right. So it's zoned R18, and it's a vacant lot after it was previously approved for a site and architectural review permit in 2019 for a new home. That permit was not fully exercised. They received a demo permit to remove the existing home and then did not proceed further with that previous permit, so the site is currently vacant. So the proposal is for an approximately 3,245 square foot one-story home. And that would result in a lot coverage of 35% and a floor area ratio of 0.34. And the design would incorporate stucco walls, composition roofing, and stone wainscoting. And these are all materials that can be found throughout the Santa Mas neighborhood. So with the one-story home, it would include a 495 square foot junior ADU. This is towards the back of the home. The front is here with the garage and then the entry. And so I don't know if the applicant has anything to add. Otherwise, if not, we could go to the SARC members for any comments.
Just waiting if the applicant has any comment.
No, I'm good to go. You guys, if you have any questions, I'm here. I'm trying to turn my video on.
Sure.
I don't know how to do it. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, thanks for joining. Adam, did you have any comments?
Yeah, I had put together a few comments for this. Let's see. I really like the two different textures on the front, the stucco and the stone. I think it looks really lovely, and I appreciate that it's neither all gray or all beige. I remember the survey we recently got back from members of the community who thought that there's a tendency for everything to be gray and beige, and I really like it's not incredibly loud, but it's a nice color. I definitely appreciate that it includes a JADU. It looks like that's been well thought out. There's a little place to park and a little path to get around back to it. I noticed that it's sort of garage fronted, but given that this is a car dependent area, that makes sense. And I think one of the bits in the packet that we were asked to look at was the bulk and massing. It's below the FAR limit, and it doesn't look like it's not below the FAR limit, so I don't see any cause for concern according to that rubric. Those are the notes that I had.
Okay, thanks for the feedback. I had one question. Is it are they using permeable pavers? It looks like it from the plans, but I only just thought of it.
They are identified as pavers. Those can be permeable or impervious, depending on the type of material. But even with impermeable materials, it does allow some water to get through in between the pavers.
My own, similar to Adam's, I think great development. Good to see a junior ADU on there. My request, if it isn't in there, would be to put permeable pavers in there as a preference to be noted for the Planning Commission. But apart from that, I wish the applicant the best success in the build.
We'll note that. Thank you.
Okay.
I have a question for staff, which is not terribly relevant to the specific item here. I noticed that the Santa Mas area neighborhood plan requires says construction of a single family residence on an undeveloped lot requires site and architectural approval by the Planning Commission. I know that there are certain instances in which the city has to by right approve things, and there probably will be more after this year in the legislature. How do requirements like that match up with that?
I'm not really familiar with what's moving forward, but I mean, as far as our code goes and the Santa Mas plan, I mean, as it is, it does require, if it's a vacant lot or if you're removing a home and putting in a new home for certain zoning districts, it does require this discretionary process. But I don't know, Daniel, you appeared. Did you have something?
I would just say that's something that our associate Steven's really working on more. But my recollection is that a lot of those laws really pertain to larger developments. I don't think there's anything in the pipeline that requires single-family homes to be done necessarily by right. So.
Okay. Point of curiosity. Thank you.
So can we just get the permit right now? Are we good to go for building?
So there's one more meeting.
I know.
You're scheduled for the upcoming planning commission meeting. That's the next one on the 23rd.
Yes.
And so, so yeah, sounds like you're on your way. You have some good feedback from Stark. And
great, thank you.
We'll see you back at the planning commission meeting in 2 weeks.
And I will change the pavers to pervious pavers, just the front, right? Just in the front.
Well, if you can do, it's just about every year we seem to be getting slightly less water.
Yeah.
So the function of the SARC is just to make recommendations or comments to the planning commission. We can't approve anything, so it's just really a type of informal meeting to give you some feedback. The planning commission may or may not pick up on it. Both Adam and I are on the planning commission. Historically, it's one of the things that come up just to get some more water into the soil. You may have a really good reason not to do it. If that's the case, I'd just type of advise be prepared for that, because you might get, I'd ask about it, and maybe some of the other commissioners would ask about it.
Sure. We'll do.
Otherwise, it seems to conform to the San Thomas plan, or the guidelines from the San Thomas plan. So I think it looks good anyway. So.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Bye.
Okay. Thank you. I don't know if item 2 is ready. Daniel, are you ready to go?
I am, but let me double check the agenda to see what time we actually scheduled item 2 for.
I think it was 6:15.
And I do have a disclosure on that.
Sure. Agenda, sorry.
Thank you, Adam, for reminding me I have to make a disclosure.
My disclosure is. Go ahead.
I looked on maps. I live 520 feet from the corner of this development, so I'm not close enough to have to recuse myself, but I felt I should mention that. Also, I met with the applicant over video conference earlier this week.
All right. Great. Duly noted.
And not similar for me, but I also had a Zoom with Dean, where we talked about issues coming up for the prune yard and their requests.
All right. If you don't mind, since we did itemize this for starting at 6:15, let's just wait a couple of minutes before we formally get going, just in case we have any interested members of the public show up.
Sure.
Daniel, can you hear me?
I'm sorry?
Can you hear me? This is Dean.
Yeah, I can hear you. You just broke up there for a second.
In terms of our presentation, am I going to share screen? Do you want me to have you share it? What's easier?
So I'll do a brief overview, and then you'll be able to present, and you can share your screen. Ryan, if you're there, can you make sure that Dean Rubinson can share his screen?
Yeah, he can.
Perfect. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you.
Sure.
And then how much time are we given? I mean, we'll fit it in, and Stuart and Adam have already heard a lot of this, so I'll try to be relatively brief. So,
I think we try to hold them down to about 5 minutes.
Okay. All right. We'll do a very quick run through.
Right.
I think the planning commission meeting begins at 7:30, so we have some time, even with a little bit of a break between this and the commission meeting.
Okay. Excellent. Well,
Have a good night.
How you been, Daniel?
All right, hanging in there. Tough time around the office, but yeah, budget issues. I'm sure that's going to be affecting a lot of cities moving forward. Fortunately, we have probably some layoffs pending, but
Oh, really?
yeah. All right. Well, it looks like it's 6:15, so let's get started. So let me share my screen here. Okay. Okay. You guys see that?
Yep.
All right.
Yes.
So the application here is an amendment to the Pruneyard Master Use Permit, or the MUP, as well as associated tentative parcel map. As you're aware, the Pruneyard is a multi-acre, multi-use property over Campbell Bascom Avenues, very long and storied history, and the city's preeminent shopping center. The City Council's most recent action on the property was in 2016, when Ellis Partners, represented here by Dean Rubinson, submitted an application to do a pretty significant expansion of the shopping center by adding multiple new buildings, a new office building, and pretty extensive remodel to the existing retail building structures as well. As part of that, the city prepared what we ended up calling a master use permit, and that's the document that was included in your packet. So that document incorporated the applicant's proposed development plan. It also created a tailored land use program specifying the types of uses that were to be allowed on the property, and it did that identifying the uses by parcel. City Council also approved division of the Pruneyard into 3 separate parcels: a retail, office, and hotel parcel. And the master use permit also incorporated design guidelines and valet parking requirements and parking management strategies. In a lot of ways, it was almost like a little specific plan just for one property. The master use permit provided a tremendous amount of autonomy and authority to staff for the director to make all sorts of approvals. So since that time, the director has granted multiple authorizations for further improvements of the existing buildings, such as the remodel and expansion of the former Outback to the Bistecca restaurant, items like that. But the master use permit is also very clear that there are certain things that are significant enough that only the city council can approve them, and that's what constitutes an amendment. So this is the first amendment to the Pruneyard master use permit. In this particular case, we're not seeing any new square footage, but a significant change to the phasing of the project. So as previously approved by the master use permit, the phasing is really in 4 separate phases. You have the first phase, 1A, 1B, a lot of site improvements. Most significantly, you had a significant improvement to the center courtyard, construction of the Pete's Coffee building, modification of building rafters, a lot of new landscaping, walkways, parking lot improvements. Construction then phase 2 was the AT&T building and the adjacent vacant tenant space. Then moving on to what hasn't been done was going to be phase 3, which was 2 freestanding retail pad buildings here, expansion of the existing parking structure, and then a couple of options for a building that would be connected to that parking structure, either a new fitness center or a retail building, depending on what market conditions would allow at the time. And then lastly, you had phase 4, which was construction of a new office building at the corner near the portals with Highway 17. The Planning Commission actually did review the revised design of that office building, I believe in 2018, it might have been early 2018 or late 2017. Now, with the COVID situation, changing economic circumstances, Ellis Partners has proposed to revise how they plan to build up the overall project. Effectively, they want to now do the office building ahead of the retail buildings, so that the office building would become new phase 3, and that would be the next phase up. And as part of that, you would have removal of the previously approved underground parking for the office building, and then now kind of a partial expansion of the parking structure. So you would have this initial phase of a parking structure. And in this scenario, you now have a circumstance where the parking garage has been built, but that new building isn't built yet, and neither are those other two retail bat buildings. So you have a new condition that wasn't entirely contemplated when we approved the project in 2016. So these plans show enhanced upgrades to the existing traffic circle, reconfiguration of the drive aisle from one-way to two-way, and trying to force people to go into the parking garage. What isn't shown on this plan, however, is kind of what phase 4 looks like. I mean, phase 4 is still as approved. You would have two retail buildings and then a new building off the garage. And then now they would also complete the expansion of the parking structure. But because the economic conditions have changed so much, the application effectively requests that we get into detail in phase 4 at a subsequent time, particularly in terms of how much parking would be necessary for the that phase. Because the new phasing plan would result in the parking structure not being concealed by buildings. On the bottom right here, this was from the approved plans. You actually have this new fitness building that's right in front of the parking structure. This served a couple of purposes. It effectively screened the structure from view when you're inside the shopping center, and also kind of tied it in visually and physically. But with this new phasing plan, you don't have that. So staff's concern was having a parking structure that was simply overly exposed to public view. And so they've worked to design it so that it's a bit more in keeping architecturally with a lot of the new architectural work that's been done within the shopping center. You have this tower with tile and metal paneling along the edges and the top that's consistent with other features inside the shopping center, additional landscape screening. And then the improvements in the traffic circle are really also intended to enhance pedestrian connectivity between the parking structure and in the shopping center, just to kind of address a longstanding issue of people not really liking to park over there because it feels too far. Here you have a close-up from the landscaping plans. This shows how the traffic circle would be modified to just encourage people to walk through it. You're seeing the additional landscaping in front of the parking garage and along this edge, and then the reconfiguration of the roadway here and kind of this new intersection combination of how vehicles come in kind of are forced to go right. And then lastly, we do have the tentative parcel map request. This would be for a proposal of creating a fourth parcel, cutting out an existing component of the existing office parcel. This is something that's noted in the staff report that staff will be recommending against as part of the Planning Commission staff report. The director feels that 3 parcels was what the city council envisioned and what the master use permit contemplated when originally approving the project, and that further subdivision could degrade the overall operational control of the center. Just a couple of more minor aspects. The office building is pretty much as approved when it was redesigned a couple of years ago. The exception, however, primarily being that without any underground parking, you don't have a need to have a vehicular ramp that takes you down into the subterranean parking. So the garage doors in the back of the building would be replaced. And since there's no ramp, that area can be recaptured as functional space, adds a nominal amount of square footage. And then lastly, the application also does request reservation of a portion of parking specifically for that new office building. Here's an illustration of the current parking management plan, shows the various zones of parking. The idea is really push people to park if you're going to be here for a while in the shared parking structure, and there's some shared surface stalls. The only area where you really see parking that's exclusive to a particular use is the hotel, which something the City Council and Plan Commission did support because there's a pretty strong relationship between a hotel and having dedicated parking next to it. Here, however, effectively asking for parking to be reserved for only one office building, and then the other 3 office building tenants would effectively have to use the remaining parking. And the question from the director is, to what extent is that really necessary and enforceable? And that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Daniel. Good presentation. I had some clarifying questions on there. maybe just to ask before we ask the applicant to talk. On the proposal is to put to do the new office building and the new parking structure to be built at the same time, or the parking structure to be built after the office?
So this proposal would effectively split the expansion of the parking structure into two separate phases. So with the new office building, you would get an expanded parking structure, and that's been sized based on a parking analysis that the applicant had prepared by Fair and Pierce, which was then peer reviewed by the city's traffic consultant, Hexagon. Now, in phase 4, they would need to add additional parking, but we don't really know what the world's going to look like in 2026. The amount of parking is going to vary based on the actual demand of actual parking, but it may also vary in how large those future buildings may be. At that time, they may not be able to build all of them, or they may reduce their size. So that second parking expansion is kind of TBD at the moment.
Okay, so there would be, okay, I don't, so could you go to the drawing with the proposed parking structure, please?
Sure. This one?
No, that's it. Thank you.
Facing? Okay.
Yeah. Or the one with the diagram with the picture of the fitness studio there.
Yeah.
That's it. So on the parking structure only picture, which one does that match up to? The expanded for only, and when you say expanded, I assume that's expanded to meet the parking requirements for the office. And then there's, as you say, there's a potential second phase dependent on demand. What does that picture at the top represent? That the phase 4 or the phase 3?
So this would be completion of phase 3. Phase 4 would have a building right here, and the parking structure would also be further expanded, most likely further backwards. But this would be phase 3. And as noted in the staff report, I mean, there's really no obligation for them to ever really finish the project and actually construct the rest of it, or in the future, they may just need more time. So this condition could be here for a long time. So even though it's somewhat interim, it should be looked at in a more permanent sense.
Yeah, I can imagine that. So this would satisfy the parking demand for the office as proposed. Okay.
And I should add too that the Prune Yard has a very unusual shared parking arrangement. It's not really like other shopping centers or properties in the city where we just have a strict code. This is actually a very robust parking analysis that's been prepared in the past and then recently updated.
Okay. And the two would be completed at the same time. There wouldn't be a lag between the office building. Thank you. That was my question.
Okay. Any other questions, Commissioner Bookbinder?
To the extent that staff doesn't want to split the property into a 4th parcel, like according to the applicant, the site is only viable to develop if it's in a separate parcel. Does staff feel that that's not credible, or what's the thought process there?
Well, oftentimes there are economic considerations that applicants do make, and those are not necessarily considerations that we can necessarily weigh. The broader ramifications from the city's perspective is ensuring that the Prune Yard isn't so fragmented that it becomes ungovernable. And allowing a 4th parcel really sets up a situation where it becomes more difficult in the future to say no to a 5th parcel or 6th parcel. I mean, the Prune Yard is going to be here for a long time. I mean, it's going to be here for another generation at least. And if in the future, what if they want to build housing? We have an affordable housing overlay zone. Now we're going to need to create another parcel to accommodate that housing developer. And it can lead to unforeseen ramifications.
is the process for merging parcels after the fact untenable?
There's no way to compel it. I mean, the whole point is to allow creation of a parcel so that it can be separately sold and held. And once that's done, it's really done. There's really no taking it back.
Okay, and so the concern is even though both parcels would be owned by the same, would have the same owner, that could change in the future.
And there's absolutely no guarantee that will remain the case. I mean,
I
ultimately.
understand.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that's just my question.
Dean, do you want to start your presentation?
Sure. No problem. Thank you. Okay. All right. Can you see my screen?
We can.
Yep. All right. So thank you, Daniel. And I will go quickly through a lot of this because you've covered it and I've covered it with Adam and Stuart earlier. Or I should say Commissioner Bookbinder and Commissioner Ching. I apologize. So as we discussed, the office building is not really the focus of the discussion, but we wanted to just, clarify that it is approved. The shift of phasing, I think, Daniel, you covered well. The optimizing of the parking and the redesign of the garage, I will let Jordan Blum, of course, Sinceri Hagee, touch on. And I'll cover the roundabouts. There's a minor change in uses also to allow medical office use on the office parcel. And Daniel mentioned the dedicated stalls, and I'll focus a little bit on that and the criticality of it, as well as the need for the fourth parcel. So I won't highlight too much here, but this was the original approval. We've sort of referred to the first phase of the garage expansion as G1A. That would have the tower component, and then G1D would be added when the retail buildings move forward in phase 4. The office building is really largely unchanged. Daniel highlighted the existing building here, the approval for the building here. And like he discussed, that would be part of phase 4, and phase 3, which, as he mentioned, could stay in perpetuity, would be essentially this. So I'll turn it over to Jordan just for a minute or two here to sort of clarify the background associated with the garage design.
Sure. Thanks, Dean. So Daniel, you did a very good job covering the design evolution of this, but I'll reiterate some of the points that you made. The proposal is to tack on a 3-story garage in front of the existing garage and to use the vehicular circulation and vehicular ramp from the existing garage to circulate through the new expansion. The design draws from the prominent architectural features around the Pruneyard site. So some of the key elements are the perforated panels at the top of these towers that were incorporated into the stair tower at the garage, as well as the clay tile roof. And the stenciled panels that we're showing at the top of the tower, we've also incorporated along both of the facades that run the length of the garage in sort of a staggered pattern to add some interest and some visibility through the garage. The stair tower that's shown here, as Daniel mentioned, is located close to the roundabout to provide easy pedestrian access to the office buildings as well as to the retail buildings. And I think Dean will touch on the redesign of that roundabout in order to facilitate pedestrian activity there.
Great. So yeah, these are elevations showing the extent of the garage. It's partial length in this direction on the, I guess, east elevation, and then this is the north-south direction where it's added and some details. So the roundabout, I'll sort of focus on it. This is the location of the existing roundabout. It's not very sort of attractive in terms of its, use and its sort of calling out for congregation and lingering. So some of the feedback we got from Paul and Daniel was to try to make it a more attractive place and a bridge essentially between the garage and the retail over here. And to accomplish that, we're proposing adding colored concrete sidewalks, some seating areas, and additional planting, as well as upgraded crosswalks connecting it to the rock bottom corner, the Asian box corner, Tower 1, and the office building. So we think that it would really make an enhanced space to linger and a way to attract users to the garage. In terms of the dedicated stalls, these stalls would only be dedicated Monday through Friday during normal business hours. Every other time they would be open for everyone's use. There's plenty of parking for these 3 office buildings. The garage here does not get fully utilized ever, even before COVID. The dedication of these stalls to an anchor tenant here is of no consideration to the overall parking balance, according to the report. But in terms of a tenant saying that they want to plant their flag at the prune yard and take the majority of this building, it's of significant consequence. And in our discussions with an anchor tenant who pre-COVID wanted to take 3 floors of the building, they said it was a deal maker for them. And that's why we're asking for the permission on the master use permit. And we think that there's plenty of convenient parking for all these office users here, and really no consequence to anybody other than this new tenant who would be more enthusiastic about coming to Campbell and being a part of the prune yard. In terms of the parcelization, we recognize that this is a financial driver here, as were the first 3 parcels. There was really not necessarily a land use driver there. We said that the 3 parcels were really essential to sort of making the initial phases of the prune yard work, and it has been. We've been successful in selling off the parcel for the hotel to a hotel owner and the retail owner. I would doubt that anybody at the prune yard, customer, tenant, or neighbor, would ever know that those are 3 separate parcels, different than they have been for the last 50 years. And I can 100% guarantee you that if you gave us the permission to make this into a separate parcel, nobody would have any idea. The Common Area Association would operate exactly as it does today, which I think the feedback that I've gotten is it's very, very successful. We're running great events. We have a successful parking management plan, good security, good maintenance of landscaping. And the only thing that would happen if we couldn't let this parcel be separated is that we couldn't effectively finance the construction of this building. So we have no intention of asking for other parcels. If any subsequent ask was, advanced, the Planning Commission and the City Council has every opportunity to say, I'm sorry, 4 is enough. I don't think this sets any further precedent. In fact, this is all covered within a parcel map, which is limited to 4 parcels. Anything beyond 4 parcels would have to be a subdivision. So there is kind of a line in the sand here that we think 4 parcels sort of stops at. If we had really focused 5 years ago on this office development and not all of the reconstruction of the retail, we probably would have asked for it initially. It just honestly wasn't our focus time. And it has no impact on the association. It's really critical, and we feel like it's a small ask to be able to make this office development feasible, which will deliver many, many jobs to Campbell and much needed activity at the retail facility, at the retail parcel, which is starving right now for activity. So we think that this office building really complete this part of the project, and we think it's a reasonable ask. And obviously, I don't think it's necessarily for discussion tonight, but since you will be talking about it in a month, I want to make sure that you understand it completely. The retail is not being split up in any way, and in talking to the owners of the retail park, they have no intention of doing any further subdivision. And anything that we do here would, of course, be governed by the association, which was negotiated, including Daniel and Paul's oversight. And I, haven't heard any complaints about how it runs. And that is sort of the gist of it. A couple of photos of the events that the association puts on. Great events throughout the year. And we think that the Common Area Association has been a great success, and that this parcel would have no adverse impact on it at all. So thank you.
Thank you, Dean.
Okay, thank you, Dean. Adam, did you have some questions?
I think I already asked the questions that I think all the questions I'd wanted to ask have been answered at this point. I have a couple of notes. Did you have some questions?
Yeah. So the additional the request for the 60 dedicated stalls and the removal of the underground parking and putting up the parking structure on the other sides of the development. What discussions have you had with the I guess the retail and the hotel? I don't quite understand how it's managed, but the other businesses on the Pruneyard, what discussions have you had with them to get their feelings? Because I think Dean, you said the 60 dedicated stalls wouldn't impact the other offices there. So I'm just wondering what discussions you've had with those, with Trader Joe's, with is it Coles or Marshalls? I just want to get a feeling for that.
What are you asking me, Dean?
Yeah.
Oh, so yeah, we have reviewed this application in detail with all the property owners. The hotel is obviously thrilled about the idea of an office building being put here. They're not concerned at all about the parking. The retail folks are equally excited about this because it could facilitate office development and generate more traffic. They don't feel like there's any impact. No one who's going to go to Trader Joe's would have parked in the city 60 dedicated stalls anyway. So they've all reviewed this application and approved it for submittal, which is part of the requirements of the Common Area Association.
Okay, thank you. In the new office, is an additional 2,000 square feet. Is that, have I got that right? Because the removal of the ramp, because there's going to be no parking structure, is that going to be another 2,000 square feet of rentable office space? I'm just wondering what the going rate is for the office space in Campbell. How much does that equate to in money?
Oh,
I think it's a bad thing. I'm just getting a feeling of, we're talking about economies here, and you're talking about justification, and it's difficult to raise money. So I'm trying to get the complete perspective here.
well, yeah, it would basically what we're doing, Commissioner Ching, is the ramp to what was originally the lower level would be filled in and would basically become a utility room per se, or a storage room for a ground floor tenant. So if we were lucky to get the building leased, it would increase the rental rate for us by that 2,000 feet. I guess, Jim Ellis, you want to chime in on what you would imagine the rental rate would be for a building here? I don't know if you can take yourself off mute. I think you there, Jim? So without Jim, I guess I'd venture maybe it's $50 to $60 of square foot per year. So if it's, let's say, 55 times 2,000, that's $110,000 a year of additional revenue.
I'm not saying it's a bad thing, and don't blame me for it, right? I'm just trying to get the complete.
Yeah, no, that's fine. That's not level on it.
Okay. And another maybe strange question. Within the actual office, is there going to be a dining area, like a startup kitchen? And the reason I ask for this is that a lot of companies have very extensive canteen facilities, which means that the employees don't actually leave the building or the complex. And the reason for asking this is you mentioned there could be additional trade for the other shops and restaurants in the area. So I'm trying to understand that.
There's obviously, it's up to the particular tenant, but most tenants would choose to move to the prune yard because they want to take advantage of all the great amenities. Most often you see those corporate cafeterias in more locations where there are no amenities in order to prevent their people from having to get in their car to drive to lunch. So I would think it would be unlikely here. Couldn't rule it out, but we are certainly hoping to find that's here to help support the existing retail tenant base.
Okay, so it could be, but I understand your rationale.
Yeah.
Okay.
I have a question, if that's appropriate, of Dean, if you don't mind. Quickly share my screen again. Dean, would you mind just commenting on the thinking behind the circulation change? Vehicles coming off Campisi being routed into the garage.
From which direction? I mean,
yeah, from Campisi. If you're coming in, I mean, the way it's designed kind of funnels you into the expanded parking garage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so sure. So right now, when you come in off Campisi, you're basically confronted with two do not enter signs, and you can either turn right towards the existing garage and follow the same path that is shown here as proposed. So you make a right and you continue west towards the highway and you come in. So that's unchanged. What we're changing here is that the do not enter sign. So this would allow you to continue south towards the roundabout and give you the option to go around the roundabout partially and then enter the expanded garage as well on the south side by Tower 1. And this way you don't have to make a turn immediately. It's always been a little bit of a challenge for us because people come in from Campisi and see two big do not enter signs. It's not super welcoming. So.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a good point, Daniel. It wasn't so much a question as a comment, as a observation. Could you put up that slide again, please?
Sure.
So at the moment, thank you. At the moment, Campisi is basically one way, isn't it? It goes towards the Prune Yard Hotel from the roundabout. Mm-hmm. Now, a comment or observation, which may be founded or not. Now you're going to have two-way traffic. I know the Prune Yard really well because I live very close to it, so I'm there a lot, and it's a great place. I'm just my concern here is that I think people are used to traffic going one way. Now it's going to go two ways. I'm not sure how much that increases the risk. And if we do want to make it two way, how can we mitigate a potential risk there if there is a risk, right? Because pedestrians crossing from the car park across to the hotel are going to have to look two ways, obviously. So maybe a question of observation. The other thing that concerns me is the traffic coming from in here. It's south, so it's coming from Pete's Coffee. I can't remember the name of that road. That is, again, as a non-scientific observation, with the Luna restaurant there and the proposed development on the other side, which is all good. It gets very, very busy, and traffic going through there. I've seen some close calls with people because it looks like it's a pedestrianised area, and any increase in traffic going through there or encouraging people to use that to get to the parking structure at the back, I think is again non-scientific, and I could be completely wrong here. I'm worried about that. Okay, I think people think that's a pedestrian area, and increasing the traffic flow through that area might be an issue. Especially if we're making the roundabout a place to go as opposed to a place to transit.
Well, I think we obviously were very sensitive to the safety of pedestrians at the Pruneyard, and we've wrestled with it in the main plaza for years now, and we feel like we've kind of managed it. And at peak periods of pedestrian use, we actually shut it down to vehicular traffic.
Yeah.
And this area, the vehicular traffic, I don't think would be increased in any way by this change. Anyone who's going to the office building that would be developed is unlikely going to be going through Pete's Coffee. So this change doesn't increase flow around the roundabout. It doesn't change the configuration around the roundabout in any way. It really only changes the section of Campisi next to the hotel from one-way to two-way. So I don't know. I certainly understand the concern, and we share that, car pedestrian interface concern, but I'm not sure this is going to make things any different. And from that regard.
If I could just jump in for a moment here, if we're really concerned about pedestrian car interactions, I think one of the best things we can do is make cars go slower. There are a number of design things that can be done to enforce that: narrower streets, speed bumps, things like that. If we have a design speed for these, if the cars are going to be going 10 miles an hour, it's a lot safer than if they're going 25, for example, if that's a concern.
Yeah, and going from 2 lanes one way to 1 lane 2 ways does achieve that to some degree. So it feels less like a thoroughfare.
And I think to have flex posts in the middle, something like that.
I think Commissioner Buchbinder, one of the reasons why we've put in these colored pavers here around the roundabout is to accentuate the pedestrian element here. We do have throughout the Pruneyard a number of speed bumps, and I've not even without the speed bumps seen anyone traveling terribly fast here, because there's a lot of stop signs and turns and merging. So I think that these improvements, especially the colored pavers, will accentuate to cars that this is a primary pedestrian area.
Dean, I forget, did we ever discuss speed tables here?
Well, we put in a speed table at the area by Pete's, where when you come off of Bascom, you now rise up about 8 or 10 inches, which sends a message to a driver that you're now in a different kind of environment. Daniel, when we talked about the West Plaza, that was part of the retail development that is now part of Phase 4. Just out front of Asian Box, there is a plan for a speed table as a part of Phase 4 over there with that plaza. But Here, I don't think there's enough square footage to justify it. You'd just be going up and back down pretty quickly.
Yeah, fair enough.
So I had another question, and Adam, jump in here from just hogging the time. We're looking at this from the perspective of the office building, the additional structure here, and I understand that. I guess and maybe this is as a result of things being parceled up between retail, hotel, and office. One of the problems with the prune yard in the retail area is the lack of parking in peak times. It is fairly chaotic there, which was one of my reasons why I'm concerned that people rushing past Pete's to get to a new parking lot at the back. So where I'm going with this is that I guess I'm looking at this as a whole development, the prune yard development, as opposed to, okay, we want to put an office in here, which I completely get, and a parking structure. I understand the rationale for that and the request here. I'm trying to keep my mind on this is a whole site as opposed to just this development and how it's working. And I whether the retail properties realize this or not, I'd love to understand this from them. There is a definite parking problem in the retail area, especially around Trader Joe's during the weekend. You really do take your life in your hands, especially as a pedestrian walking around that area. So I'm not sure how this is going to help. That wasn't there, but again, this is why I'm trying to look at this holistically. I'm not sure whether this is going to hinder, and I guess we haven't really talked about that. And I've only really thought about this since last couple of days.
If I can just jump in on this.
I can offer one. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Let me know when it's my turn.
No, go ahead. I think you were going to directly address what you said. I had a few comments on that, but if you want to directly address that, go right ahead.
Well, yeah, I'll give it a shot. I think obviously we're very sensitive to parking management here. We don't want anyone to not come to the prune yard because there's no place to park. So we've done a lot, and Daniel had pulled up a slide earlier showing the limitations on parking durations that didn't exist prior to our ownership. So I think we've done a lot to sort of optimize the parking. But I'd say that this addition to the parking garage would have dramatic improvement on weekend parking. On the weekends, almost nobody parks in the parking garage. But by bringing the parking garage closer to the retail and enhancing the roundabout to create a bridge, I would venture that if you're going to go on the weekend to Rock Bottom Brewery, for example, you will much more likely park in this parking garage, which will be completely void of office users on the weekends, therefore taking pressure off of the parking on the Bascom side of the shopping center. So I think there's going to be a shift in patterns to the advantage of all the retailers and the customers, especially on the weekends when no one's going to be in this garage office tenant. Does that make sense?
That's a fair point. Fair point.
So the thing I wanted to, thank you for that, Mr. Rubinson. The thing I wanted to drop in here is that just from a broader perspective, the prune yard, if you look at it from the aerial view, like the parking view that you showed us, it's essentially like a small traditional downtown surrounded by a moat of parking. And the idea that we would add yet more parking when we're not actually using all the parking we've provided there seems like just a terrible idea. I appreciate the attempt to, what I think is happening here is that people will go out to the front of Trader Joe's, see a number of parking spaces there, see that they're all full and think that there's no parking. I know that there are ways to indicate to continuously measure and indicate the number of parking spaces available in the garage. I think there was some talk about doing that with our downtown garages. I've seen it over at Santana Row. There's says 225 spaces available in this garage kind of thing. I would certainly encourage us to make the best use of the parking we have, which especially parking garages are, they're expensive to build. I would be very hesitant to suggest that we should use yet more space and money on parking if we're not efficiently using the parking that we already have there, or the parking that we will have there. Some of the other notes I had here were.
Let me just interject there for a second. I'll tell you, this is actually a great idea, and Daniel and Paul had the same idea 5 years ago, and required us under the master use permit that when we do expand this garage, we put in parking indicators at key entry points to the garage, to the prune yard, to tell people that there is parking in the back and how many stalls are available. So we haven't designed it yet, but it is part of our requirement when we build this garage.
That's correct.
Cool.
I was actually going to add the same thing, that originally was going to happen in phase 3, but the new phase 3 still works. So the existing language still applies. So they'd have to install an active parking management system, as Dean described.
Oh, okay, awesome. In that case, I think that would significantly help the issue with people believing that there's no parking available when there's plenty of parking available. It is understandable that people would not want to drive all the way around to the other side at 8 to 10 miles an hour to see if maybe they could get a spot in the garage, something like that. The other notes I had on this, if this is an okay time for that, I remain concerned about the utility of the sort of mini park in the middle of a traffic circle. I appreciate that it's a traffic circle, so people will not be, blazing by at 30 miles an hour. The last time I was there, it didn't feel that inviting, but maybe it will look more inviting with the changes you folks will be making. This may be out of scope, and Daniel, please tell me if it is. But when we talk about pedestrian circulation plans, it seems to be that the question is entirely about pedestrian circulation within the prune yard. I know that as a general rule, I think this may be part of our general plan, that we're supposed to try and figure out how to better integrate the downtown area with the prune yard. And given that it's a pretty short walk from there, we have that lovely underpass under 17. There's two separate rapid bus lines that stop right outside the prune yard. And we're trying to encourage people to bike more. The idea is that I think that people would be walking from the outside in as well. And so I'd like to make sure that it's safe and convenient to get to the prune yard if you're walking there, in addition to if you're driving there. And I had one other question. I think you may have already answered this, but is there a roof deck as part of the parking garage?
There would be parking on the roof of the parking garage, not a deck. We would be adding 2 levels fully parked.
Just asking. Okay, those are the thoughts that I had. So thank you.
Okay. And if I can actually add, just in terms of pedestrian circulation, so it's not picked up in the staff report of the application materials, but just for background. So when the council approved the master use permit, they also imposed a condition of approval that required the applicant to work with Caltrans to actually create a public pathway along Highway 17, connecting the trailhead. There's actually a trailhead on the other side of this garage, to connect that all the way to the other side of Campbell Avenue. And so Dean's team worked a long time with Caltrans to see if they were amenable to that. And it became very challenging. Very bureaucratic process that eventually necessitated the city's involvement. And now it's coming to a resolution where Ellis Partners and their partners will provide to the city about $250,000. And then the city itself will now take on that project to construct that new public pathway.
And that's off of is that the Los Gatos Creek trailhead?
Yeah, and it would basically Highway 17 adjacent to it is a service road used by Caltrans next to the abutment. So the idea is to effectively use that service road as dual use. That will serve Caltrans, but also the public as a public pathway.
Okay, and just the last thing I wanted to mention is the area that is going to be, that is proposed to be turned into an office is currently a vacant parking lot. It has been vacant every time I've ever seen it. And anything we can do to make that something useful as opposed to a vacant parking lot, I'm in favor of. I have a hard time seeing a compelling reason to not do the subdivision if that makes a difference between producing something useful there and nothing useful there.
Thanks, Adam. Just being mindful of the time. Daniel, could you put up the 3 things you wanted the SARC to give feedback on so we can round this up and formally put some comments on it, please?
Apologies, I'm afraid I don't have that on the slide, but the 3 points were, the parking structure, just in terms of its architectural appearance, if that was something that you felt was well done.
Mm-hmm.
And circulation, particularly around the traffic circle. And then in terms of the office building, particularly the request for the reserved parking, kind of the 3 big topics.
Okay, so
we've covered.
Adam, do you want to go?
Go ahead.
One each of those.
Sure, I can go first. So I think the architectural treatment of the parking structure is about as good as it can be. I mean, it's a parking structure. You can make it look like it matches the rest, and I think you've done a good job of that. In terms of the circulation changes to the traffic circle, I'm not sure how you would make a traffic circle more engaging to be in for a pedestrian, but my main concerns about pedestrian friendliness involve getting into from the outside, and I don't see any particular problems with that. I think having the brightly colored walkways for safety is an excellent idea. And I think the requested reservation of parking stalls for the office tenants is not only supportable, but I would be very disappointed if we did not do it. Especially, I mean, you're essentially, the question is, are we giving up 2,000 square feet of usable office space in order to have a bunch of empty parking? And I don't think it's supportable to do that. So yes, I support the reservation of parking stalls for the office tenants.
Okay, thank you. So my comments, architecture, similar. I think it's type of compatible with the existing theme of the prune yard. Circulation, I personally like to see a little bit more detail, which might be in the pack, and it's my fault for not noting this. Speed control, signage. It's a great idea to make the roundabout place to be, which will attract kids, which is a good thing. So I'd like some thoughts. I'm sure this is going to happen about safety for kids running out from the roundabout and the traffic. So what can be done about mitigating that? And then the dedicated parking stalls. I think I'm okay with that, provided the other, and by the sound of it, they are, provided the other tenants understand the implications and are okay with that. That would be my only concern. I think the other comments I had were more for the Planning Commission meeting than for SARC, so it goes beyond the remit of what we're talking about tonight. So I wanted to get some feedback that we could present to the Planning Commission based on today's presentation.
Okay, thank you.
Daniel, do you feel that we have answered the appropriate questions and so on?
Yeah, I think we got everything we need.
Mr. Rubinson, do you feel like, are there any other things that you feel that we haven't made clear?
No, this has been super helpful. I've got notes from everything that you've mentioned, and we'll definitely, obviously, pedestrian safety is really, really important to us as well. So we'll make sure that, and when we get into the detailed design, we'll make sure to focus on that. Thank you for your time and consideration. We look forward to seeing you in a month.
And
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you for your feedback and reaching out to us and taking the time to explain this. Appreciate that.
Yes, I appreciate it. I will probably reach out to your fellow commissioners. So if you have any interaction with them, and you feel like it's a valuable use of their time to have a preview, I'm going to try to reach out to the rest of them before the meeting in a month. So
Right.
Okay. Thank you so much for your time and support of our project.
Okay. Thanks, everybody. Thank you, Daniel.
All right, thank you guys. Bye.
Bye.
Have a good day.